Personally, I think in a lot of cases, the 60 amp is kind of the sweet spot.
Okay.
80 amp is going to get you, that starts to push your electrical capacity of your panel. So in a lot of cases, if you want to get an 80 amp charger, you may have to upgrade your panel. You may have to get a new panel. You may have to get new service. There's a lot more upgrades, and I think in a lot of cases, not all cases obviously, but in a lot of cases that additional cost probably won't be worth it to the driver.
Welcome to MTE's Plugged In Podcast. This podcast focuses on the world of electric vehicles. We combine expert interviews and personal stories to educate and inform listeners about electric vehicles. So whether you're an early adopter who has been driving an EV for years or you're just starting your research, this podcast is for you.
Hello, I'm Brandon Wagner, and I'd like to welcome you to Middle Tennessee Electric's Plugged In Podcast. Amy is out today, but I would like to welcome Ryan Stanton. He serves as the Senior Project Manager for TVA's EV Evolution Initiative, part of the Innovation and Research Group at TVA. And beyond that, Ryan is a longtime EV driver. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Ryan, you've had an EV since 2013, various EVs. Can you give us a little bit of background? Before we find out what you do at TVA, give us a little bit of background on your EV history.
Sure. So interesting. I think my EV journey begins here in Rutherford County, actually. So previous job, I worked for a company here, and it was 2013. Nissan came along. They did a little ride and drive with a Nissan Leaf at our office, and said, "Hey, we've just got these on the market." They were just starting to produce them at the Nissan plant here. So I bought a Nissan Leaf in 2013. It was, I think it was maybe one of the first 10,000 or so that were built.
Wow.
Here in Middle Tennessee. I had that for about 4 years, so till 2017. Drove it to and from work. I did a few like small road trips, but nothing big. Kind of had a shorter battery range, maybe 70, 80 miles, depending on the direction of the wind.
That is really an early adopter. We think now like 2018 is early adopter. That's significant.
It was different back then. Yeah, there was obviously a lot less range, and there were way fewer charging stations
right.
too. So it was very different back then. So fast forward 2017. I took a new job. I was working downtown, working pretty close by. So my second EV was actually an electric bike.
Oh, no kidding.
So I had an e-bike, and I commuted, to and from my office downtown, and then in 20 had a couple kids, so can't really transport kids on e-bikes very very well. So about maybe 2020, I was following Rivian pretty closely, and ended up putting a reservation down, and I got a Rivian R1T truck. In it would have been 2022 when it was delivered. So with pandemic, commuting, obviously kind of things got disrupted. But so I've been, I guess, driving electric for a little over 10 years now.
I know that one of the first Ford F-150 Lightnings that TVA had, you were the point person, and I know you had a lot of requests to come show that to everybody. And thankfully, you came to our first annual meeting of our EV Car Club. Tell me a little bit about your experience with the F-150 Lightning.
Yeah.
Now that was before you had the Rivian. Is that kind of what got you thinking you wanted a truck?
So I'd had a truck, for a long time growing up. I was hoping to get an electric truck at a certain point. I think TVA got our first Ford Lightnings around the same time I ended up getting my truck. So at a certain point, I had borrowed the work truck, the Lightning, for TVA for work, and I had my Rivian, so I had two electric trucks sitting in my driveway.
Oh, no kidding.
At a certain point. And was glad to be able to bring it down to the Car Club event. I think was it 2022 maybe?
It was 2022.
I think it was one of the first Car Club events that you all had. So the Lightning, I think just Ford getting into the electric pickup space was a huge signal to the industry that this is going mainstream. This is not just for these little small compact cars. This can be kind of a full size truck. It's an amazing pickup. It's an amazing truck. It is truly a full size half ton pickup. the fastest, production F-150 ever. Does 0 to 60 in 4 seconds or something like that. And then it's got all the features and technology, as all the other trucks. And it's just really nice to drive. It's quiet. It's smooth. It's really powerful. So I really enjoyed driving the Lightning. I think TVA today we have about 40 or so Ford Lightnings in our fleet. They're used in the field. They're work trucks. They're out on working on our transmission line. They're out doing telecom work. They're out in the field doing truck things.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that we're less than 2 years since that first event, and they're all over the place now.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, they're definitely proliferating, and I think the crews that have them have been really they've really enjoyed having them. There's a bit of a learning curve with charging, but once they kind of figure out how and where to charge it, they're pretty happy with them, and they don't really want to go back.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you. You mentioned you didn't do a lot of road trips in the Leaf, which is understandable. But if I remember right, you put quite a bit of miles on your R1T, and you have kids. I'm curious, what is it like to do a road trip, especially with a family, in the Rivian?
Yeah. So the Rivian, I've had it. Let's see, about 18 months, and I'm getting up to close to 30,000 miles on it. So done road trips, commuting, kind of work trips around the state. The road trips with families. So I think it's EVs are actually kind of it's a pretty logical, it makes it pretty easy with kids, because if you've got especially with young kids, you're gonna have to stop fairly frequently anyway. And so you've got charging stations generally, at least if I take the example, if you've ever driven from Nashville down to the Florida Panhandle, 30A, the Gulf Coast, it's about a 450 mile trip down there. And you've got charging stations basically every 1 to 2 hours on the way down there. So you have to kind of plan your route out, but it works out because I don't know about you, but like my kids, they want to stop every 2 hours anyway. So it works out. I'll plan a charging stop. Usually like a Electrify America or at a Walmart. It's the perfect place to get a couple of kids, make them run up and down the aisles while the car charges. Do a bathroom stop. Get a bite to eat. Get back in the car and keep going. So I've done that a couple times now, and it works great.
And there's plenty of room with it being a truck. There's back seat. It's got plenty of leg room and everything.
Yeah, got plenty of space. The Rivian, the cab space is a little bit smaller than like the F-150, F-150 Lightning, but still pretty decent. It's the Rivian's bigger than like a Tacoma or Colorado, but a little bit smaller than like an F-150.
Okay.
Kind of a nice in between size.
Yeah. So Ryan, I know charging probably looked very different when you had a Nissan Leaf versus now that you have a Rivian R1T. Can you tell us a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah. So when I got the Nissan Leaf originally, and I've been in the same house the last 10 years. It's a 1925 old Craftsman. When I got the Leaf in 2013, I said, I'll think about getting a level 2 charger, but it came with a level 1 charger, so I could just plug it into a 120 volt outlet.
Okay.
And I said, the day that I find that level 1 charger doesn't work for me anymore, I'll call my electrician. I'll get a level 2 charger installed. After 4 years, that never happened. I used a level 1 120 volt charger the whole time.
Okay.
And I think that's because the vehicle, it's a smaller vehicle. It has a smaller battery. It worked fine. I tried the same approach. Well, obviously for my e-bike, I was able to plug that into the wall, no problem. It was even smaller. Okay. The day I got the Rivian, I tried that. I said, well, how long can I get by with a level 1 charger with a truck? And it lasted 1 day.
Okay.
So I think the moral of the story is for a smaller vehicle like a Nissan Leaf or like a Model 3, in a lot of cases you can get by with a level 1 charge. And there's a lot of people do. Some of the data we've looked at says 20% of the charging sessions in our region are actually level 1 chargers. So there's a lot of people that use level 1 chargers. Huh. It sounds like you've got one as well. It works well for you. And that may just depend on your availability of charging at work or things like that. But anyway, I digress a little bit. I needed that level 2 charger. I could tell pretty quickly because the truck's bigger. It's less efficient, has a much bigger battery. I was also driving a little bit more once I got the truck. So I got a level 2 charger installed.
Okay.
Have a 200 amp service at the house, and it works great. It charges. It'll fully charge with that level 2 charger. It's a 48 amp charger. It's on a 60 amp breaker.
Okay.
We're electrical nerds, so we can talk about this kind of stuff. But it's an 11 kW charger.
Okay.
135 kilowatt hour battery. So it can, if I come home with 10-20% charge, it'll fully recharge that battery in 11 to 12 hours.
Okay.
So if I get home at 6 o'clock at night from a road trip, it's fully charged by 6 a.m. the next morning. So it works perfect for that application. Beyond that, I charge at home most of the time. I typically on day to day, I'll charge like to 70%.
Okay.
So I don't charge 100% every day. I'll just plug it in when I get down to like 30 or 40%, and then charge it back up to 70%. So 1 to 2 times a week, depending on.
And so, remind me, what is a range? Like, if you're at 70%, how much range does that give you on the?
Yeah. So 70% range for the Rivian. It has a little over 300 miles of range total,
Okay.
so
Okay.
it's about 200 miles of range
Okay.
at 70%.
So I'm curious. You said you got a 60 amp charger. We're talking, when people call in, they say they're getting a truck. A lot of times they're being recommended to go to an 80 amp charger. I'm curious what your thoughts are on 60 amp versus 80 amp.
Yeah, that's tough. I think in a lot of cases the 60 amp is kind of the sweet spot.
Okay.
80 amp is going to get you, that starts to push your electrical capacity of your panel. So in a lot of cases, if you want to get an 80 amp charger, you may have to upgrade your panel. You may have to get a new panel. You may have to get new service. There's a lot more upgrades, and I think in a lot of cases, not all cases obviously, but in a lot of cases that additional cost probably won't be worth it to the driver.
Yeah.
Because they're still going to be able to use that 60 amp, that 11 kW charger.
Right.
Will work 100% of the time.
And I've heard even if you get an 80 amp charger, you could serve it with a 60 amp breaker and see if it works before you have to upgrade everything to 80 amp.
Right.
80 amp is sort of like, this is how high you can go, right?
So that's the max. Yeah. Most chargers they're switches you can kind of derate it essentially.
Okay.
So if you have an 80 amp charger, you can still put it on a 60 amp breaker. You just have to derate it a little bit.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I've noticed that this is probably not a real good mathematical rule of thumb, but if you have a 240 volt circuit and whatever your ampacity is that you're serving that's about maybe a little less than that is about how many miles per hour you can add. So for me, what I've noticed is if I've got a 40 amp charger, I can add maybe a little less than 40 miles per hour.
Okay.
And what I'm, for even though I put on 20,000 miles, I usually have to refill less than 100 miles a day. So that's 3 hours, and I'm kind of done. So
yep. Yeah, that's what I find too. I mean, my truck's it's bigger, so it's less efficient, so that it works out to like I think 25 miles an hour.
Okay.
For the truck, but it's the same thing. Usually, 4 to 5 hours a couple times a week is all it needs. So I'll charge it overnight. It'll be done usually before midnight because I'll plug it in 7 o'clock and it's done.
Well, I want to ask one more question about the Rivian. You've had it now, you said, for 18 months.
Yeah.
So how do you like it? I mean, is it everything you want, or if there's someone out there that's kind of thinking about a Rivian, I like to. Every now and then we'll get a call or an email. I'm thinking between these cars, and so I like to try to point them to maybe a library we can give them of things to consider.
Sure.
So if someone's considering a Rivian over a Lightning or maybe some other vehicle, what would you tell them?
I mean, the Rivian's great. I love it, and I'm not planning to get rid of it anytime soon. I can't promote any one manufacturer over another. I mean, the Lightning's a great truck. The Rivian's a great truck. I'll say, as a general rule, electric trucks it's really interesting to see what the manufacturers are doing, because there's kind of this like arms race between all of them, because the Tesla Cybertruck just came out. I got a chance to go see that in person.
Oh, cool.
In Franklin just before Christmas. So the Cybertruck's got all these cool features. It's got this big, huge, vault on the bed. It's got 800 volt battery pack architecture. I mean, it's a polarizing truck, I think, but they've really packed a lot of innovation in that truck. Same thing with the Rivian. It's got this gear tunnel, this enclosed storage between the bed and the cab. It's got a big frunk. It's got four-wheel electric four-wheel drive, a motor on each wheel. And so each truck is just a little bit different. I personally love it. It's been a lot of fun to own. But I'll say, I mean, each of them each of the automakers are really, they're really trying to compete, out innovate each other. So it's really kind of exciting to see that.
Well, I lied. I have one more question. I know you fish, and I don't know if you ever pull a boat or anything, but have you towed anything with the Rivian?
I have towed with it. Yep.
What's your experience there?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, as a general rule, if you're towing, say just plan on cutting your range in half.
Okay.
Plan on so whatever, if you get 300 miles of range, plan on getting 150 miles of range with that boat, or with that, whatever's on that trailer. Now, in the real world, you probably won't lose that much range unless it's a really big, big travel trailer.
Sure.
If it's shaped like the broadside of a barn, you're probably going to lose half your range. If it's more aerodynamic, you may only lose, 25%, something like that. But definitely plan ahead if you're going to be towing. But I'd say in most cases, you're going to be able to get, most electric trucks, you could probably get 100 to 150 miles, maybe 200 miles of range out of it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one thing I wanted to ask you, I haven't quite hit 12 months yet as an EV owner, so some of this cold weather.
You got the Model
I've got a Model Y.
Okay.
And I've already put 20,000 miles on it. Yeah. So I drive from Lebanon to Murfreesboro every day, and it just it
adds up.
Accumulates fast. Yeah. But one thing I'm sort of hearing is that this cold weather is going to impact things. Now, you've had, I mean, from the very beginning of 2013, everything's changed. Range has changed. Battery chemistry has changed. What kind of tips do you have for, I know we have a lot of folks in our EV Car Club that bought their EV over the last 12 months because of the tax credits. If this is their first winter driving, what kind of advice would you have?
Yeah, that's a good question. And really the winter is probably if there is the most difficult season, you do see a little bit of an impact to range. However, just let's consider people in Minnesota and Canada and Norway own EVs. Much colder winters than we have. So it's just, I think it's part of just getting used to, you might lose a little bit of range in the wintertime. It's really, I'd say most days here in the lows are in the 30s or 20s, you're not going to see much of an impact.
Okay.
Generally just, charge up a little bit more often. It's really, I think the where you probably notice it the most are when it's really cold, like single digits, and if you're on a road trip.
Okay.
So those longer road trips, you can see that battery range decrease. You may need to stop. May need to do one extra stop on your road trip, for example. But there's different ways to get around that. Just you plan around it, and for most people it's not a big issue.
So I've heard one of the things you don't want to do is just when it's cold outside, get in and just. A friend of mine has an EV6, and he was telling me you can tell when his wife drives versus him because he tries to warm the battery up a little bit, and she just doesn't. So he said you can sort of see that the range drops off. Do all cars have some kind of? I mean, I know I'm asking you a big broad question here, but is there technology you can use, like an app or something, to go ahead and let the car know I'm going to be driving pretty soon, to kind of, or just practices you do when you first get in?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so. I mean, batteries like to be warm. They don't like to be cold. So if what'll happen just naturally if you do get in the, it's fine to get in the car cold and go. The car is going to use a little bit and it's going to use some energy to heat the battery up, and so that's when you see that range go down.
Okay.
Some EVs will show the battery temperature while you're driving. The Rivian just did a software update, so now you can see what the battery temperature is in real time, And it's interesting now in the colder weather. You can see it might start out at like 35 or 40 degrees, and by the time you get done with a trip, it's like 50 or 60 degrees.
Okay.
So it'll use some energy to heat that up. If you're plugged in at your house, for example, or at a charging station, it'll use some of that energy to heat up the battery.
Okay.
If you get in the car and just go, which is fine too, it'll just use some of that. So that's where you start to lose a little bit of range. It's just the car is trying to heat up its battery pack. It's trying to stay warm.
Okay.
Just like we would.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Is there any I know you hear these things, and I don't know if they're true or if they're myths, but don't turn your windshield wipers on or something like that when it's cold because it's just going to use more energy. Is that a legitimate amount of energy or just kind of negligible?
No. Use your be safe.
Yeah.
Turn your windshield wipers on.
Yeah.
Turn your headlights on. The things you can do, and most EVs now will come with heated seats and heated steering wheels. Those are a big game changer because if you're on a longer road trip, the cabin heating can actually take some extra energy. So you can if you really want to get squeeze as much range out of it as you can. Some people turn off the heat while they're driving on a road trip and just rely on the seat warmer and like the heated steering wheel, and they might like bundle up in a jacket and a hat and everything.
Yeah.
You don't have to do that, but that probably has the biggest impact if you're on a longer trip. But I'd say for the most part, just drive normally.
Yeah.
Turn your headlights on.
Yeah.
Use the windshield wipers. I like to I'll use the heat normally. Again, if it's a long road trip, and you're trying to squeeze that extra the last couple of percent out of the battery, maybe you can turn the heat off for a little bit.
Well, Ryan, I appreciate you sharing a decade worth of experience with us in just a short little episode. We haven't even had a chance to touch on what you do at TVA, so I want to explore that. But for now, I think we're going to wrap up this episode and hopefully talk with you more on the next episode. So thank you for being here and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions about MTE's EV Ready program or the Night Flex rate or anything EV related, please email us at evcarclub@mte.com. For more information on MTE's Drive EV programs or EV Car Club, please visit driveev.com or email us at evcarclub@mte.com. Until next time, plug in, power up, and drive safe.